feedback. I guess we can find out now. Good evening, everyone. Today is Thursday, June 7th,
hello.
2018, 7 o'clock p.m. on the East Coast, United States of America. And we're doing our weekly Facebook Live.
Mm-hmm.
My name is Tony Davis, this lovely young lady to my left, you're right on the screen. Is my good thing, Nicole Davis, and we're your marriage and family relationship mentors. And as we like to say every week, we tell you.
You wanted me to check for feedback, right?
Yeah.
I did it intentionally. You can't do it. We're not interviewing anyone, so you.
That's a different feedback. Okay, got it. So why do we do this? We tell you every week, just for those of you who tune in for the first time, and for those of you who've heard this before, you should probably know it by now. But we do this really because we committed our lives to being intentionally successful in marriage and in parenting.
Mm-hmm.
And we like to tell people the story or the fact that really a lot of times people, as we were coming up through the ranks, so to speak, and they would look at our children,
mm-hmm.
They say, wow, they're so well behaved, so well mannered, they're doing so well, all the superlatives, and they would say things like, just really being nice, but also serious at the same time. You guys should write a book. And we knew that was something that was in our future, but we said we needed to wait till our children reach the age of maturity, get out of the house, and start making some decisions on their own outside of our direct influence, so to speak. And let's make sure that what we were saying worked on them. We knew what we were saying was right, but we wanted to make sure that we had some results that we can tangibly point to and say, yep, that's it. That if you do it this way, that'll work. And thankfully, our kids proved us right. They gave us some credibility in that area.
Mm-hmm. We
can come in here and write some books. And we said we purpose to do that, and which led us to eventually writing some books. The very first book we wrote on our own, we ended up writing 3 books on our own. We call it the Done Right series. And the reason we call it Done Right simply because you have two elements that we attribute to doing something right. And that's one, using the Word of God as your foundation. We believe that if you're going to do anything, you have to have some kind of standard. And we believe that the best standard by far on the planet is definitely the Word of God.
Mm-hmm.
But even with that being said, a lot of times, when you're doing things according to the Word of God, which means that you're probably a Christian, right? If you're talking about the God that we serve, a lot of times you can get a little nervous and a little lazy. You want him to do everything, but he said he's giving you the power to do both. He's giving you some responsibility. So the other part of that equation for doing things right is the hard work. You have to do things. You have to implement those principles that you learn in addition to every personal relationship with them. So we wrote the Done Right series, and the first book we wrote actually was now that we're not integrating anyone, I can do this and not so like I had 3 left hands. Very first book, and I'm still struggling. The first book we wrote was Parenting Done Right is Hard Work, but it's Worth It. And this is a 31-day guide to really give you some parenting tips to win the battle for your children. And then that's really important because the children are in the battle. They are facing things and challenges a day that most of us didn't experience when we were growing up. And parents play a big part in that, especially the role and relationship you have with your children. It's going to really dictate how much success they have as adolescents, and also as they get older, get into their adult years, because parenting doesn't necessarily stop when they become teenagers, even age of majority, or even when they become adults. Just there may be a shift in how you parent and how the relationship dynamics play out, but nevertheless, you're still a parent. But then I said, well, shucks, so we're on the roll. Let's go ahead and talk about one of our favorite topics, which is being married to each other and having fun. We believe that marriages should have fun. They should be hot, and they should be focused, because you gotta have you have to walk together with that vision. So we wrote the second book. Really, they all came out simultaneously, but we're just telling you the order in which we wrote them. Marriage Done Right is Hard Work, but it's Worth It. And this is a 31-day guide to put the fun, fire, and focus back into your marriage. Like I said, we believe that all those elements should be present in everybody's marriage, and you should be intentionally going after them. So we wrote a book to help you with that. Mm-hmm. And then we said, while we're really on the road now, let's just go for it. We talked about we would say this is our favorite subject, or one of our favorite. We say the favorite or one of?
One of.
Yeah, one of. We don't know what the other ones are, but we'll just.
Yes, we do.
I mean, if we were going to rank them, we haven't.
Oh, you didn't say rank them. You said we didn't know what they were.
Yeah, because so look, you can only have one favorite, right?
Right, and we don't have one favorite.
Yeah, but if we're going to rank them, so we don't know. But this is one of our favorite topics right now.
We don't know what. What don't we know?
We don't know what the other ones are and how they would rank.
Oh, how they would rank.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's why we're going to say one of.
Okay.
But this is something we spend a lot of time talking about, which is leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And it's leadership done right. It's hard work, but it's worth it. And this is a 31-day guide to really become an effective leader of influence from the inside out. A lot of times people get into leadership positions and they think that being a leader means I just in charge of people. I get to bark out some orders and tell people what to do. And a lot of times you're not qualified to be there. That's one issue. Then also, in addition to that, you and I, we both know a lot of people spend an inordinate amount of time really wasting time because they talk about the ineffective leadership that they may be subject to, right? Mm-hmm. But so you don't want to be that kind of person. And look, let's be honest about it. Even from the perspective of marriage, a lot of times women, and we'll probably say women, they don't want to be disrespectful, but they may be very disappointed with the leadership that's in their house that's coming from their husbands, right? Mm-hmm. And then a lot of times husbands don't really know how to be effective leaders. So that's a leadership issue as well. So we address all that in the leadership book. But the book that really got it all kicked off was the anthology Speak to the Mountains. This is not our book. We're one of 30 plus co-authors in here. We wrote a section on the topic of family there. But the reality is, that's the Done Right series. That's the anthology. But the reality is this: one of the things the thing that we like to focus on for all of this is the how-tos of acquired knowledge, because we know there's a lot of knowledge out there, especially with this information age. But a lot of times people just struggle implementing what they've learned, and we want to focus on how to get things done and get it done right, so that you can have those effective results for everything that you're trying to do. And every week we come together at 7 o'clock p.m. to discuss this. The goal is 30 minutes. We miss it every week, but that's showing an area where we need to improve. And so therefore we're going to try to be successful this week. Probably won't be, but we're going to give it a shot. We're going to give it a shot anyway.
I love this, Leon. I love this.
Talk about
love it.
Marriage. Yeah, Leon. Yeah, brother. You're going to get this right. We'll see you in a couple of weeks, man.
We're excited.
We look forward to seeing you and your future good thing. And yeah, get this thing right, man. Mm-hmm. So listen tonight, because this topic tonight, I'm telling you, man, it's going to really bless you and enlighten you and give you some tools to keep you smiling during your marriage, and as opposed to scratching your head like wondering what's going on up in here.
And and the other thing that we really didn't think about this because we were just living our lives. But what's missing are examples. What is marriage supposed to look like? What should a good marriage look like? And we don't have a lot of examples out here for us to ask to mentor us, to ask questions of, to get coaching, to spend time with. And that is one of the problems that keep us in an isolated place where we feel like we're the only ones going through whatever we're feeling.
Yeah, you're always the only one.
Mm-hmm. And especially, with men, it's very difficult for men to share what's going on. And it really helps when it's good if you have a group of men that you can share with who are doing the right things. But if not, that there's at least a couple, a man and a woman that you can talk to, share with, and ask questions of, which is so important. And even when we were in our younger years, we've always tried to make sure that there has been somebody in our lives, some couple in our lives that we could get information from and that we could see as an example, because in both of our cases, neither one of us grew up around successful marriage. And so that's another thing that really makes this a passion for us and why we're doing it now, because we know that there is a lack out there of couples, and this is who we are. This is not just for the camera. Like, we really practice every day to take care of each other, to share, to be kind to one another, to consider one another, to support one another, because that is the way God intended marriage to be. And
have a good time with one another.
And have a good time. Well, that's a part of taking care of each other, enjoying the presence of one another and staying friends, even when you're dealing with difficult situations, and they will come.
Everybody has.
Even when you don't necessarily agree, because you'll have plenty of that. What should never change is the foundation of what brought you together. And you always going back to that is that we love each other. we care about each other, and we're friends. And so if that's your basis, if that's your foundation, then you can weather whatever comes, because you never forget that.
Yeah, and I also, in addition to that, you know that this person is the best person for you.
Because you've chosen to spend the rest of your life with them.
Even when they tick you off and they get on your nerves, and you choose not to see it at that moment, you know that this person, I'm going to go through life with this person, and we're better doing it together than apart. And the reality is, even if I traded you in, the next person, she's going to have her issues too. So it's like, it's just a different set of issues. And then you have to say, you know what? Well, she's decided to love me, and she knows all my bad ways and all my faults anyway. She still wants to be with me.
And look, and if you choose, or if I choose to trade you in, if I've never worked on the things that were a part of the problem in the first relationship, then they're bound to repeat themselves, because I'm still there, or you're still there.
So in other words, you would downgrade and downsize, trade me in.
It's a possibility, but I mean, this long, I've trained you well, so I think I'll keep you.
Yeah, you should. You show your intellect, right? But anyway, So anyway, tonight, what can we talk about tonight, babe?
Well, tonight we're talking about selfishness in marriage. And unfortunately, selfishness is it starts rather early, and it comes in when we don't even realize it. So you think about it, you're a couple and you're spending time together, you're doing things together. And in the beginning, you're really trying to do things that will make them like you more.
You're trying to impress.
You're trying to impress.
But
somewhere around, I would say even Leon, with the planning of the wedding, some selfishness starts creeping in. You want your way, they want their way, and you're just giving in. If those things are not recognized,
or you're trying to be extra considerate, that
and you really don't agree, right? You're trying to be extra considerate, and you really don't agree, you don't speak up. That is a breeding ground for selfishness. So it starts very early, and because of that, when the selfishness grows in a relationship, sometimes it gets to a point where you feel like there's nothing you can do, because it has been able to take a foothold or have a place in your relationship from a very early beginning. So tonight I want us to look at a couple of definitions of selfishness, just to make sure that we have a working definition that we're all working from while we're having this conversation.
We're going to be bringing this word up a lot.
So what is selfishness? The dictionary says it's a lack of consideration for others, or concerned chiefly with one's own personal profit or pleasure. Now, if this is the state of affairs in your marriage, then that's sad already. If you are in a situation where I know I'm being selfish, and a lot of times it's hard for us to even look at ourselves. So as we go through tonight, really try to just look at yourself. Be introspective to ask yourself, am I being selfish?
But when your spouse is fine, you can't just look at yourself. You gotta
only for the selfishness part.
Okay.
Only for the selfishness part. So you're going to be looking at yourself as we're talking. Now, of course, you may see your spouse or your soon-to-be spouse in that. But when you see you, because you're the only one that can change you, that's the only person you have control over, start there, and the benefits will be dramatic for the entire relationship. And that is a guarantee. So, all right. On the flip side, what is selflessness? Because that's what we should be striving for once you choose to join your life with someone. Selflessness. Selflessness is concerned more with the needs and concerns of others than with oneself. Now, think back in the beginning. That was almost easy to do. In fact, we could just kind of overlook the faults. We can rationalize or justify why someone was acting a certain way.
Yeah, you can justify those inconsistencies back then when you're trying to accomplish the goal of coming together. And
the love is so strong and so big that it takes preeminence over someone's downfalls or the things that you think are not so great.
Yeah, you just overlook the flaws.
And that's because of the love you have. But then what happens? Because this is still the same person. You still say you love them, but those flaws get magnified. Why is that?
I don't know. You tell me.
Well, they get magnified because we don't address them. We don't know how to communicate. We don't know how to say in a loving way, that bothers me, or why did you do that? Or can we talk about how you responded to me when we were at X, Y, and Z? You don't have the conversation and that's for many reasons.
No, and in some cases, people just acting too. Then they put it's like scene is over. Now they get into their real self too. So I mean, that's another one. You know, you have perpetrators, and that's not even a Christian thing. That's inside the church, outside the church. You have people who say, okay, now that they've conquered, they think they can go ahead and be their real self. So I mean, that's another element. We're not going to spend too much time there.
That's true. Yeah.
But you asked why. So.
Right. But to go to that, if we're talking to Christians, because that's our premise for everything we do, the Word of God is our guide. That's where we get our standards of living. And so as a Christian, the expectation is that the Word of God is your source of information that you're using to make decisions about how you're going to live, how you're going to act, how you're going to treat people. And if you're doing that, then we need to talk to you, because if selfishness is big in your life or in your relationship, then the Word of God is not big.
Well, and also one of the things that you would even say, Nicole, you would like to say that selfish is not an adjective that should be associated with us. I mean, that's not one of the attributes. So, and so just really look at yourself there. But let's transition for the sake of time. Let's talk about even with this topic of being selfish. Let's talk about, why do we even get married? Like everybody, whether it's you or me or the people who are watching the broadcast right now and those who will be watching the replay, why do we even get married? I mean, you asked a question, now I'm asking a question. Why do we get married?
Well, we say it's because we want to share our lives with somebody.
Yeah, I mean, that's usually the basic premise of getting married. We want to share our lives, right?
We feel like we don't want to do life without this person in it.
We want to be by ourselves. We don't want to be by ourselves.
Right.
And I want to do it with you. I mean, I want to do life with you.
Right.
You know, so
right.
And think about it. And you've been, so sharing our lives is one of the things that we say we want to do. And when you're talking about sharing, that's not a selfish act. So that's the primary reason we get married. So now let's talk about this whole selfish act in marriage, though.
Well, okay. So, but the sharing part, anybody that you meet, whether they are married or not married, and we're going to talk about the not marrieds, they are constantly looking to share their lives with somebody, right?
Absolutely.
And I don't think we really understand fully, and we say it even in our what is it? Our vows to one another. When you get married, we've been married over 26 years. So yes, they're vows. When you say your vows, you are talking about how you are just going to completely and totally give yourself to this person. Whether it's good or bad, rich or poor, you know, you make all of these promises, and it's it's a gamble, because you don't know what the future is going to hold. But what you are saying is, no matter what, I vow to be there for you and with you, to share.
All right. So now let's talk about this, though. We're talking about sharing, right?
Yes.
So tonight we're going to talk about 3 areas, because the topic is selfishness. We're going to talk about 3 areas where people don't share. 3 areas that bring up a lot of contention. Now, granted, it's not an exhaustive list, but from our perspective, these are 3 of the big ones where selfishness needs to be addressed. And we're gonna hit them a little bit. We're going to talk about time.
Yes.
We're going to talk about sex, and we're going to talk about money. Right. So, and the reason we're going to talk about these, because these are 3 areas that if you give proper attention to them, you can strengthen your marriage. And if you don't, it's going to bring death to your marriage. But the reality is this: the
same 3 areas.
Can
either strengthen your marriage or bring death to your marriage.
It can strengthen or kill it. Strengthen or kill it. And as you like to say, the choice is yours. You have a choice. It's not out there in the winds. Is it going to happen? No, you can control this. And as a matter of fact, this is one of those areas. But I'll say, if you give attention to these 3 areas, these are good areas that you can actually, what I call, affair-proof your marriage, right? Because, and here's the thing.
Divorce proof.
Or divorce proof, right? Divorce proof your marriage. And not being selfish and attending to the needs of your spouse, is really a good way to submit to one another, because, we learned that we're supposed to submit to one another. We're supposed to support one another. And one of the things you can do foundationally to do that is say, you know what? I want to support her. I want to support him. I want to share with him. I want to share with her. And how can I support him? How can I give myself to this person? And that's how you do that, and realize that doing so is not a negative thing.
Mm-hmm.
As a matter of fact, it's a very positive thing. But even with that being said, here's one thing I want you to keep in mind, that even with that being said, if I'm going to support you, supporting you doesn't mean that I'm just going to keep doing what you want me to do so that you can be satisfied. Right.
Right.
As a matter of fact, if I keep doing that and you may even take actions to abuse that, then I may think I'm being selfless. But the reality is, if you understand that, you may be selfish having that expectation of me. And
then that is selfish of me.
That's selfish
because
of you.
I'm not considering the fact that I need things to be my way.
Uh-huh.
And all is well as long as you do things my way.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm really concerned or love you the way I do, I'm going to be mindful of, what am I asking this person to do? And am I willing to do the same things that I'm asking this person to do?
Are you willing to give me what you're asking of me?
So like, for example, we talked about this yesterday. So if we're in a bed, and, you know, pregnant women do this quite a bit, but I'm not pregnant, so I'm not going to use that. But let's say
you've been pregnant a couple times.
We're in a bed, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I say, oh, babe, could you please go to the store for me and get us some milk? I forgot to get some milk. Because that's the exaggerated.
That was exaggerated example that somebody else gave.
Yes, an exaggerated example. We're in the bed, but if you love me, you'll get up right now and go to the store and go get this milk for me. Now, I'm wrong for asking somebody to go late at night. We're in the bed to go to the store. That's wrong of me, and I know if he asked me to do the same thing, there's absolutely no way
absolutely not.
that I'm going to go to the store.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a litmus test for you. If what you're asking is not something that you two would be willing to do for the person you say you love, don't ask them to do that.
Because that's selfish of you.
That's selfish.
And because a lot of times, especially as Christian folks, right, you'll put all those demands on the other person, saying you should be willing to do this, you should be willing to do that. As a matter of fact, if you were selfless, if you love me, you should be willing to do this. And the reality is, you're asking them, you're being selfish by asking them to do that because you know you wouldn't want to reciprocate it. And
so on the flip side, you hearing that request, you say, okay, honey, I'll go to the store.
And you mad as a mug.
And you mad all the way to the store. You got an attitude. So you didn't do that out of love, or you really wanted to serve this person. You didn't want to hear their mouths. So even though you now are doing what they've asked you to do, you got an attitude about that. So when you come back, you're not going to be talking to her.
No.
You got an attitude. And so she's going to be like, what did I do? And that's lack of communication, because all he needed to say is, I will, but not tonight.
And as a matter of fact, but even with that being said, she may say, well, what did I do? Then his answer will be nothing, right? But the reality is, he may have said, you know what, I'm not going to fuss her out right now because I want to keep peace in the house. But really, he fussed her out in his mind, and his mind is all jacked up. And he's really told her all kind of things, you know, in his mind. So, and now you have this strife in your relationship because of selfishness, but yet you never really articulated it. So you never really get out on the table, and now you're wondering why you can't have fun, find focus in your marriage because really you're ticked off. But let's talk about this whole thing with time, quality time. My nose is itching. I feel like I need to sneeze or something, but let's talk about quality time, like being selfish with your time and with your spouse. Here's what I would say. One of the primary things you need to understand is you and your spouse need to have a mutual common definition of quality time. You need to know what kind of quality time your spouse requires and what kind of quantity time your spouse requires. And then you need to understand their definition. That's okay. I mean, there's no bright line test for however we may define quality or quantity time. May be totally different for every other couple out there, but nevertheless, you need to be able to define what that means for you. But then when when your spouse articulates that to you, and I say it out there, just have a mutual definition. I say it, but the reality is, just coming to that mutuality can be tough. That could probably end up being like a weak conversation. It really could, because you guys may have different needs and different expectations, especially if you didn't discuss it coming into marriage. But here's one of the things I want to caution you with, is even with that being said, don't or be careful of trying to impose your standard on your spouse, because your spouse may say, I need this from you. And then you're telling them, no, that's excessive. That's unrealistic. You should really be satisfied with this, because now you have two people trying to get their way as opposed to trying to understand the other person. But I see your brain working. So go ahead.
No, all I'm thinking about is the communication piece and how difficult that is when you're not happy, when something is going on that you don't agree with. So it's so easy to communicate with one another when all is well. And working on communication, because a lot of times, especially when you're irritated, when the other person is saying, well, why did you say it like that? Or what's wrong with you? And because you don't want to be completely honest about whatever your issue is, and you say nothing, or it's been a buildup over time. This is just one of many things you've done, and I've not said anything. So now I'm choosing to say something, but it's coming out wrong because I never addressed the other issues that I had. That communication piece is really important. You need to learn how to communicate with each other, and you need to practice with each other, and you need to give each other permission to say when you don't like how you're communicating with me, like, I don't want you talking to me like that. And say it in a way that you don't have an attitude. Don't talk to me like that. Well, if your head is moving and your tone is like that, now the other person is offended or mad, and it just becomes this vicious cycle.
And that becomes the discussion as opposed to what you were really trying to address.
Dealing with the issue. So that's a big piece, learning how to communicate with each other about these three areas.
Yeah. So when I say really coming to a mutual agreement on what that really means, I know I just said and just like I just like really just glaze right over it or just blast it out there like it's something simple. We know that within itself can be very difficult because you have two different individuals and two different perspectives, two different expectations, and two different, really sometimes even two different ways of even measuring outcome, right? But coming to that agreement is really important. That way you can know if you're meeting the needs of your spouse. But once you get to that agreement, talking about being selfless, not being selfish. Here's the thing about it, especially when you're talking about, because everybody, look, I don't care who you are, every relationship goes like this. It's if you can't see me on the screen, it's a roller coaster. I mean, there are always ups, there are always downs. And that's called life, right? Because we're individuals and we have issues and we have to learn how to deal with them, right? Especially with each other. But notwithstanding that fact, here's the thing about being selfish. Don't ever withhold time from your spouse as a form of punishment. That is the most selfish thing that you can. That's one of them.
So what do you mean by that?
Well, I know that you may want some time, or may know that I want time in a certain area. It could be anything. It could be a planned outing, or it could be time around the house where we normally do this, or it could be whatever we may have planned, right? But now you're going to withhold that time as a way to punish your spouse because you're mad, or because you're not, or mad because you're disappointed, or you're, for whatever reason. Don't use withholding time as a form of punishment to your spouse. So in other words, because you're like, I know you really wanted to do X, or I know you expected this from me, but now I'm not going to give that time to you. Or
because it's something that you're just not interested in doing. So I want to spend time going to the park and walking, or to the lake, and you don't like being outside. I'm just using that as an example.
Oh, no, I can give you a good one. I mean, you like to run around the track. And to me, just running around the track, making a bunch of left turns and seeing the same scenery, it's like, come on, if we're going to run, let's run through the neighborhood, right? And you're like, I don't want to run through the neighborhood. The streets aren't soft. And I guess that's your biggest issue, huh? Streets aren't soft, huh?
Yeah, but I don't need you to be with me. I'm saying this is when I want you to be with me. So if I want us to be together at the lake,
okay,
and you don't want to be outside, that's an area where, because that's something important to me, that you would be willing to give me the time to do that, even though you don't necessarily enjoy doing that.
Right.
And that's something that we both should be willing to do, whether it's watching a sport, especially where, it's mostly men who enjoy sports and want their spouse or significant other to be with them in doing that. We as women need to be okay with doing things that you don't necessarily like or enjoy, and vice versa. That is a part of loving and caring for one another.
And I'll just give women this tip. If your husband is into sports, don't blast him for being into sports. I mean, that's part of his makeup. That's part of his competitive juices are flowing there.
Mm-hmm.
And then you want him to get away from the sports to come spend time with you. And then you'll
don't
say,
make it either or.
Yeah. Then you'll say,
Mm-hmm.
you know what? Well, what am I going to do with you? It's like, oh, nothing. We're going to relax. It's like, you know what?
Watch a movie.
Or watch a movie that you know he doesn't want to watch. What I would say, respect his time. I would say, give him that time, let him watch his sports, and then come back and do something later. Do something either before that sporting event, do something after that sporting event, or if you know what, if you really want to just really get into his heart, just come right on into his world and get into that sporting event with him. Mm-hmm. And just that's one of the things that you can do that make him just feel like he's really connected to you.
So selfishness comes in when you're thinking about yourself when you're supposed to be doing something for the other person. Mm-hmm. So if I am only concerned with the fact that I don't like sports, that's being selfish. I know this is a way to spend time with my husband. That's something he enjoys. So because I love him, I should be willing to do that. That's for shopping, grocery shopping, going to the movies, watching a movie, whatever it is, you consider the needs of the other.
Or even with that being said, like as I said earlier, give him the freedom to do so without feeling judged and condemned. Because he needs something.
Don't let them know that you don't like it.
Yeah, well, yeah. Or just like, you know what, that's his thing. But then by the same token, he can't spend all day in doing that and not give you time either.
Right.
Because he likes it. Yeah, you know, he has to learn how to properly balance that out. Because in that case, now you're withholding from her because you know that she wants some of your time and you can't spend up all your time watching grown men that you don't even know work.
Over your woman.
Who
is there with you, who you say you love. So factor time in is what we're saying. Mm-hmm. Factor time in. Consider it every day. How can I spend some time with my spouse?
Knowing what the other person needs.
Yep.
And with men, one of the things when it comes to time, I would say this, you know, a lot of times we talk about women and we know that women, they love to be loved and adored and felt special. I mean, I think that's really like everybody really, but especially little girls and then even women, you guys like feeling special, right? And we think about women being reciprocators. You know, whatever you give her, she'll give it back to you, multiply. We've heard that many times over the past, 20 or 30 years or so, right? Mm-hmm. But here's one of the things that I would like to say, even with men, I think it's been scientifically proven, at least in my scientific research, men can be reciprocators as well. I can't tell you how many times I've talked to a man and he's been acting funky because and his rationale was that she was acting funky. Uh-huh. You know, so now he's not giving her what she wants because of the way she's been acting. So what I would say, even regarding that, I would say, hey, man, remember this, that we are to leave and cleave, right? And cleave, the Hebrew definition of the word cleave. We talked about this in another webinar, but I'm going to Facebook Live, but I'm going to bring it up again. It's the word dabah, which means to aggressively pursue. And that's your responsibility. And when you don't do that, you're being selfish because God designed her to be aggressively pursued. God designed you to have me come after you and just really serve you. And it doesn't make me weak. It makes me smart, right? Because that's how God designed you. So remember how God has made her, even when she's not performing the way that you want her to. And now, granted, and even with that knowledge, here's what you can do. Say, you know what? I know she wants that from me. I know she'll respond to that in a positive manner. And now, because I know she wants that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to withhold that because, you know, look,
because she get on my nerves.
I didn't like the way she talked to me. Or I don't like the way she didn't respond to. I don't like the way she rejected me, or whatever the case may be.
Whatever it is. And Tony, that's a really good point, because one of the things that happen in relationships, especially when you start doing life, when there are children, finances, other sickness, other things come into the picture, you cannot stop pursuing one another, courting one another, and doing the things that you did in the beginning to be together, like still seeing that person with hearts in your eyes, or reading things, or watching videos, whatever it is that can keep that fire burning and kindled inside of you, because life happens. And it is easy to get caught up in things that will put a wedge or distance in the relationship. Like, you really have to make it your business or be intentional about, how do I show my spouse today how important they are? And
love is spelled Time. I mean, we all know that. What's the team Marie MONEY never took the place of LOVI? Yeah, I need your loving, but time too. We need. I don't even know why I went there, but we need time. But also, and then so that's one of the major areas of that we need to really not be selfish with is your time. And here's the thing about that. And we're talking about it from a Christian perspective, but really that's a principle that works regardless of your faith. You don't have to be a Christian. You can be of some other faith. You can have no faith at all. You give your spouse quality time, it's going to enhance your relationship. You don't give them quality time, it can bring death. Now let's talk about that second area where we can't be selfish. So the first area is time.
Yes.
The second area is sex. And then really the same rules apply. The same analysis apply there. You got to understand, if you're coming to this marriage union, you got to talk about what your expectations are there. You know, I may expect it 4 or 5 times a week, and then you may say, well, once a month is enough, right? So now you got to come to like a happy medium.
Or vice versa.
You keep saying that there are women out there like that.
There are women who want sex more than their husbands. There are women like that. Yes, there are.
What is it? A higher libido?
Go on and make your point.
No, I'm just saying. I've never heard a brother complain about that.
Okay, well, I think they probably would be embarrassed too. So go ahead.
Yeah, no, that was it. The point is, the same thing, the same rule applies, or the same analysis applies, the same standard applies. You have to figure out what's good for you guys. And really, and this is one area, I mean, even with time, but this is really a form of time because it takes time to do this. But this is an area that you have to protect at all costs. And you can't be selfish there either, because if you think about it, just from a relationship, a human interaction perspective, sex is the one thing that I can do with you that I can't do with anybody else. I mean, for instance, we're going to have dinner and all that kind of good stuff, lunch, and I can do all that with any other woman on the planet. Really, I mean, if you may even recall, once upon a time with my job, I had so many people taking me to lunch. I mean, I was even asking you, where should I go today, and what should I get? And I would even bring stuff back, because I was out at lunch with a lot of women, because I can do that. I mean, like lunch, whatever it was business, right? But the sex is the one area that's the one area that's reserved for the husband and the wife, and you got to protect it. And the analogy I like to use all the time, and I don't know if it's the best analogy. If someone has a better one, please, I'll be interested in learning about it. But I use the food analogy, and it's like the whole thing about being full. I mean, if salmon is my favorite dish, I love salmon. I can eat it I can really eat it 7 days a week if I had the opportunity to do so, and I can eat it. I can eat it in my omelet for breakfast. I can have for lunch, and I can have for dinner. But nevertheless, the point I'm making is this: if I'm full, you can put the world's finest salmon in front of my face, and even though I would say, "Wow, I really love salmon," I won't touch it if I'm full. But when I'm hungry, I may be willing to eat things that not only that aren't my favorite food, I may even be willing to eat things that I really don't even like. And I think about the same thing, even from a sexual perspective. A lot of times you can say, well, you should be disciplined, and we should, but we've seen a lot of people fall and they lack that discipline. And I think a lot of times if people are fulfilled sexually within the marriage, they are more inclined not to go outside the marriage seeking that fulfillment. And I know you can say, well, you should have these standards, and we should, but I'm just talking about what happens to people. So you got to protect it and give your spouse what they need in that area, and don't be selfish, and don't withhold.
Well, and that's the thing. So, and this is normally from a woman. You see this happening more with women, that we will use sex as a reward, and sex is not a reward.
Or a punishment, or lack thereof as a punishment. Okay,
it's not a reward.
Okay, go ahead, make your point.
Yes, because I let you take all the time you want to just say that's what you just said. It is a right. Sex is a right in the relationship, and it is also it helps against divorce and infidelity. Like Tony was using the example of being full by eating. Well, sex is a weapon against the enemy, because when you are not having sex, the enemy can come in and start putting things in both of your minds about what the relationship is or is not, why the relationship will or will not work. And you will be open to that because you and your spouse have not been coming together sexually. Why it's so important is because you become one. The more you are relationally involved with each other sexually, it strengthens your relationship. You have greater agreement with one another. You are open to grow and to change. Your communication is better. Because you are having sex, you put yourselves in a position to be flowing more in unity. When sex is working, you don't even think about it. It's only 10% of the relationship. In fact, you probably won't even talk about it. I remember one time Dr. Phil talked about this. But when you are not having sex, it's 80% of the relationship. In fact, it's all that your spouse may be talking about. Maybe both of you or one of you. We're not having sex. And so the fact that you're not having sex, that becomes bigger than everything else. And that becomes the focus point. If you're hungry, every time you turn around, you're looking at, where can I eat? Where can I eat? But if you are having sex and you make sex a part of the relationship, which it should be, it's
a very important part. I need to
it's why you get married. Like you said, that's the only thing you can do with your spouse that you can't do with anybody else. So you can't be selfish in that area. You have to take care of each other. And as a matter of fact, there's a scripture, and I wrote it down because I want you guys to look at this in 1 Corinthians 7. And it begins around verse 3. It says, and I have it in two different versions. I have the Message Bible and the New Living Translation. It says, it's good for a man to have a wife and for a woman to have a husband. Sexual drives are strong, but marriage is strong enough to contain them and provide for a balanced and fulfilling sexual life in a world of sexual disorder. The marriage bed must be a place of mutuality. The husband seeking to satisfy his wife and the wife seeking to satisfy her husband. Marriage is not a place to stand up for your rights. Marriage is a decision to serve the other, whether in bed or out. Abstaining from sex is permissible for a period of time if you both agree to it, and if it's for the purpose of praying and fasting, but only for such times. Then come back together again, and here's the key. Satan has an ingenious way of tempting us when we least expect it. Or it says, do not...
That first version was the Message. Let them know.
That was the Message. Or it says, you should come together, and this is the New Living Translation, come together again so that Satan won't be able to tempt you because of your lack of self-control. And so while we can say all the time that our spouses should not cheat on us, which is very true, we should take care of one another because it is the right thing to do. It is what he deserves. It is what I deserve. And we can't be selfish when it comes to performing sexually.
Mm-hmm.
Is that it?
I don't know. You done?
Is that good?
Done. Okay. So now, and the other area. So in other words, yes. So you said it's something that we deserve. It's we understand that temptation is very real.
That it's a right.
Yeah, and it's a very important part of the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And you talked about the fact that it enhances the relationship. You talked about it helps us to have agreement,
mm-hmm.
helps us to have better communications,
mm-hmm.
and it brings unity.
Mm-hmm.
So with that being said, that tells us that that's an area where we should not be selfish and withhold from our spouse.
And the enemy is no match for a healthy relationship.
Mm-hmm.
If you're spending time together and you're having sex regularly, the enemy it doesn't matter what you face as a couple. If you're spending time together and you have a regular sex life, you can weather every storm. Couples who are having problems in these areas, the first question you can ask is, how much sex do you have?
And they'll tell you that they ain't doing it.
And you'll know that's where the buildup is, the stress and the tension. You having sex, you can work through anything.
Look, when's the last time y'all had sex? And he like, oh, man, you see the head rubs like, I don't even.
Mm-hmm. So another selfish part, though, is if we're mother, and if we're working and if we have children. Unfortunately, when you read these scriptures in the Bible, there are no caveats in there. It doesn't say as long as you're not tired or as long as the children are up and out of the house. That's a part of being married. That's a part of that sharing that you so desperately wanted to give your life up for.
Part of that creating time.
Right. You must make time for that. even if you have to schedule it. There are some people that feel like, oh, I don't want to schedule it. I want it to be spontaneous. Well, life doesn't always avail itself to
when
that.
you have kids and you have both spouses working, if it's spontaneous, you'll probably have it like once every 2 years. If it fit neatly into the schedule.
Right.
Let's just be honest about that.
And that's not realistic. But what is realistic is that there's an expectation from both that we will do this, and you plan those things out if you need to. Is this good, you guys? Let us know. You're not commenting. Let us hear from you. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, and they say the whole theory is, look, they say if you want to plan it out, Lord help you, the his night, her night, our night, right? Just decide how you're gonna do it for that night, but make sure that you have sex. So
what does that mean? You just kind of you can't just say that.
His night out, her night.
What does that mean?
I think the audience is mature enough to figure.
So his night, her night, our night. So his night is when the primary focus is on him. If time is an issue. Her night is when the primary focus is on her, and the our night is when we're going to give ourselves ample time to just be together and allow both persons' needs be met. Okay.
All right. I would think they smart enough to figure that out.
All right. Well,
but just in case you weren't, now you know. All right.
Does that make sense? Okay, go ahead.
All right. Go ahead. Now another area where you can't be selfish is the money. And as a matter of fact, because you looked at like why do people get divorced, and it's like all these different reasons, and I think everything comes back to selfishness, really.
Yeah.
But money, right? So when you look at like maintaining the house. Most people understand the general needs. If you didn't pay cash for your house, you probably have a mortgage. Even if you pay cash for your house, you have the necessary bills, gas, electric, insurance, things of that nature that come up either annually or or monthly, right? But what about those other things, like like for the women, you got the hair and the nails. The men, you have sports tickets, big ticket items like electronics, whatever you might be into. And now I was like, okay, now you get into these beefs about how the money is being spent on personal items.
Right.
Your items are more important than my items, or my items are more important or necessary than your items. And then you have this contention, or you may say, hey, you know what? I don't think we should be spending money on that, but say, hey, you spend money on all this. Then there needs to be a discussion on how this money is going to be spent. And you need to really give consideration for the other person and what they desire. Right.
And so now, or let's talk about money from the standpoint of we don't have enough to be buying the things that you want to buy outside of the necessities. So if I'm into jewelry, or I'm into clothes, or I'm into coats or shoes or purses, and our budget doesn't lend itself to those kind of purchases. Well, the selfish thing for me to say is, but I like these things. I like to look good. Taking no consideration for our family situation, or if we need to get things repaired around the house, or if the car needs to be repaired. The selfish thing is to only focus on what I'm not getting and not thinking about the household as a whole.
Sacrifice.
Or what I have to sacrifice.
Or, yeah, okay, go ahead.
Or the his and hers. My check is mine. Your check is your check. Your check goes to pay the bills, and I can spend mine on whatever I want. If that's an agreement you have and it's okay, then fine. But if the need is that both of our salaries come together because one cannot sustain the household, then you should work together where the money is in one pot. If you have a separate account and they have a separate account and your money never comes together and it is always a mine and yours, then you have not come together as one. And you are two individuals trying to have a marriage, and at some point it's going to fall apart.
Yeah, and doing that, it really that's a breeding ground for lack of transparency. But also, just keep in mind, just legally, it's all considered marital property anyway, unless you did that antenuptial thing before you got married. And most people, unless you just pack it like that with so much affluence, most people aren't getting prenups before they get married. So if you're like one of those people, like you're broke and you're separate, that just really leads to lack of transparency. And it may be more beneficial to strengthen the relationship by just coming together and just laying everything out and say, okay, how are we going to do this, and how are we going to support each other in this endeavor? Because once you start making additional income, bringing more revenue into the house, it'll just help enhance the relationship, because now it really brings, it's like, hey, we're in this thing called life together.
Together. We're in it together.
And as a matter of fact, why do we get married? Because we're going to share.
We want to share. And it's not just transparency. That's a trust issue. If you don't want your spouse to know how much money you have, or you don't want to share, you don't want your spouse to know what you're spending money on, or you don't want to bring your money together, that's a trust issue. And you really need to question whether or not you should be getting married. If you can't allow that person into that part of your life, then you should not be getting married, because your money, where your money is, that's where your heart is. Mm-hmm. And if your spouse cannot have your money, your spouse does not have your heart. And that's hard, but that's the truth. Mm-hmm. So if you have issues around money, then you need to think about why. A lot of it is how we grew up. I get that. Some of the stuff that we've been taught, I get that, or experienced, I get that. But as a Christian, because that's the perspective that we're speaking from, everything is joined. Everything. Just the other night, say, oh, we need to put some money in this card. You just grab my wallet. I don't even know what you took out. Everything is like, hey, go into my emails and can you go into my email and check this for me? And we have all passwords and all that kind of stuff. We don't have anything individual other than drawers. Really, other than like underwear, everything clothes, Well, that's what you say. I can wear your stuff, but you can't wear my yours. Stuff.
Yeah, Nicole. Yeah, you can wear my t-shirts. Nicole has actually. I'm gonna put you on blast, baby. She has actually gone into my drawer and worn my socks. Like sometimes she'll wear tennis shoes, and she say, I'm just gonna wear some black socks. She's taking my golf socks. I'm like, what are you doing wearing those? Or she's taking my dress socks and put them on. She don't give a rip because she figured they're in the house, they hers. So, and she's right. And so the selfish thing would be if I say what's mine is mine and what's yours is mine. Mm-hmm. That's the selfish thing. But it should be. And if you want to wear my socks, I don't care. But you can't. You can't wear my socks. Yeah. So the sharing is you have to decide that is how we're going to be in this relationship. And the thing with your money, that is a decision. You have to decide, I'm going to share my money with my spouse. When you need to make purchases, you need to decide, I'm going to have a conversation now. Or give money to my family.
That's a whole nother thing. Like who we're going to give money to and how much we're going to give, what we're going to purchase, how much we're going to purchase. Like there can be an amount that you can spend up to this amount and we don't need to talk about it. But if you want to spend beyond a certain amount, we need to talk about it. And that's just consideration, common courtesy.
And it's lack of transparency and it's selfish.
And it's trust. Mm-hmm. All of those things. If you're buying things and you're hiding it, that's a problem. You need to address that. That is not cool. And that is not the way you should be in a relationship. And that's selfish.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so just really come to a meeting of the minds there. I know, once again, that's one of those things that's easier said than done, but you got to sit down. You have to have the conversation like, okay, babe, how are we going to do this? How are we going to do this? Mm-hmm. And let's make sure that we're on the same page. Because really the goal is if you're sharing life. So, and if I'm going to share life, I have to be open and honest with you. You have to be open and honest with me. And we have to do this thing together. Make sure that we're on the same page and not be selfish and not withhold. Mm-hmm. Just really open, honest, transparency, but understanding what the other person needs as well. So for instance, if I know you like a certain thing, and we have discretionary income to satisfy that need, I shouldn't deny you of that just because I want to control you.
Right.
Right. So there are a lot of things to look at, but really just don't be selfish there. And even things like jobs. I remember one time when just looking at employment, I remember one time you asked, you said, well, babe, if they offer you this amount of money, will you take the job? And I said, I think so. Yeah. You said, no, you won't. Because it wasn't enough money. But then by the same token, there was another opportunity. It's like, I don't care how much money they offer you. And it would have been more than enough money. And I wanted to take the job because we needed an increase in revenue. And you looked at me, you said, babe, at what cost? Mm-hmm. What cost? Because, you had me, you had the children. And if you took that job, you would never be here.
And we want you in our lives.
We want you in our lives.
We want to see the kids grow up. We want to spend time together.
We had a goal of making sure that we had a healthy, intact family. So even with things like that being said, you have to look at the seasons that you're in and be willing to not just look out for yourself. Remember, it's a collective, it's a whole. You have to do things for the entire family that's going to benefit everybody. Because and then as a man, it can be very easy to justify and say, hey, I'm making more money. I may have increased I think probably like a $20,000 or $30,000 increase at that time, something like that. I don't know. But whatever the case may be, it's easy to justify because I had to handle business, I had to take care of the house. But the reality is you would have suffered, the boys would have suffered, and it wouldn't have been worth it. And that would have been a selfish move on my part to pursue that, knowing that time was very important.
Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to share with you guys, because I looked up 10 most common reasons for divorce. And this comes from marriage.com. And this was just released May 8th. And the top reasons they gave were infidelity, money, lack of communication, constant arguing, weight gain.
Weight gain by who? I didn't read that. So what they say?
Weight gain by either one of them.
Okay.
You know, when I married you, you know, I'm pretty much the same size.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So anyway, unrealistic expectations, lack of intimacy, lack of equality, not being prepared for marriage, and abuse. And when Tony and I talked about this, I said at the core of every single one of those, at the core is selfishness. We can find selfishness in every single one of those reasons why people divorce. And the not being prepared, that's the beginning of selfishness, because you don't take the time to learn what you need to know, either because you think you already got it, or we love each other and that's all we need. That's enough to begin.
Can we just put a pin in it right there? We say we love each other and that's all that we need. But if you think about it, how many divorced people do you know who will still tell you, I love my ex-spouse?
A lot of them.
So love isn't enough.
Love isn't enough. You have to take time to grow your marriage, protect your marriage, and change for your marriage so that it can grow. So that it can stay strong, and that you will continue to grow together and not grow apart. Because when anything you don't take care of, it's going to break down.
It's going to die.
It's going to break down. So how do you, and just to offer this as we close, the best way to know whether or not you are being selfish, 1 Corinthians 13 is one of the best
love
chapters in the Bible to show us what love looks like. And it says that love is patient and kind. Love is not jealous or boastful or proud or rude. It does not demand its own way. It is not irritable, and it keeps no record of being wronged. It does not rejoice about injustice, but rejoices whenever the truth wins out. Love never gives up, never loses faith, and is always hopeful and endures through every circumstance. You can't find selfishness in there. And if your love doesn't include all of these things, then you know that selfishness is present. So we would advise you to focus on this scripture, both you and your spouse, and see where you need to make changes so that this is being lived out, because the peace and the joy and the appreciation that you can have with one another, and the beauty of sharing truly in your marriage is possible. It's not impossible. It just takes work.
It takes hard work.
It just takes work.
But it's worth it, right?
But it's worth it.
And like I said, so just to wrap up, that's what we wrote in our book series, the Done Right series. And once again, marriage done right is hard work, but it's worth it. Leadership done right is hard work, but it's worth it. Parenting done right is hard work, but it's worth it. Those are the books that we have out there. You can get them on our website. I feel like I'm trying to play cards for the first time. I don't know how to hold it down. You can get them out there on our website, empowertoengage.com, or you can just simply type in our names, Tony Nicole Davis, on Amazon. Get the books, or you can put the title of the respective books on Amazon.com, and you can get them there and order them there. For those of you who've already ordered them and you've given us personal feedback directly, we would love for you to go to Amazon and put those same words out there so that other people can see them and see those comments and see how those books have blessed your lives. Yes, and we also ask that you like our page. We have Empower to Engage as a Facebook page. We have Empower to Engage as a website. And then we're also on YouTube with Empower to Engage. We have a channel. You can go there. All of our videos are uploaded there. You can share them, watch them over and over again to get whatever you need out of them in order to strengthen your relationships. And we do things on parenting, marriage, and leadership. And that's leadership, working on yourself, personal leadership. And then we have the Love Lab for couples. That's a group on Facebook. Please join the Love Lab.
We upload our videos there. We also put other marriage items there so you can get information that you can read at your leisure that will help strengthen your relationship. And then we also want to just encourage you to join us for our Thursday night gatherings. We do this every Thursday night where we're speaking on different topics.
7 o'clock Eastern.
7 o'clock Eastern. Marriage. This is marriage month again. And every week it's a different topic. So that concludes our time together this week. Do you have anything else?
I was just going to once again reiterate, just don't be selfish. Just really think about sharing life with your spouse and giving them what they need. And it's not a weak thing, especially for men. It's not a weak thing. It's a very smart thing. It's going to enhance your relationship. Mm-hmm. Be selfless and just really go do everything that you want to do because it's possible. You can have it all. Mm-hmm. Just put the work in and get it done. And
one other thing. So Tony and I, Tony explains in the beginning that we're your family and marriage mentors, but we're also coaches, life coaches, parenting coaches, marriage coaches, and we work with couples, we work with parents to help you strengthen your relationships and have resources that you can use when things get hard. So if you're interested in something like that, check out our website, give us a call. We'll set up a consultation and get you going so that you too can have 26 years of wedded bliss. It is possible. So thank you so much. Thank you, Aunt Gloria. We appreciate you.
Yes, we do.
And thank you, everybody, for joining us. Have a good evening.